So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Nordic Pavilion at the COP28. The next session will be about green mobility. The heading is From Slow Lane to the Fast Lane. This is also the first morning program here at the Pavilion. We should also get to the fast lane. We have just started this day in Dubai. Transport is often considered as a slow lane, but it's vital for the green transition. And this is what we are now discussing. How do we get from the slow lane to the fast lane? What is the role of finance? This session is hosted by the Nordic Investment Bank, which is the international financial institution of the Nordic and the Baltic countries. And first, I would actually like to take the opportunity to say Happy Independence Day to Finland. It's the Finnish Independence Day today. But our panel today is actually more Sweden-dominated. We have two persons from Sweden, and that's not a coincidence because Sweden is very, very strong in green mobility. If we look at our own region, especially the automotive sector is pretty much located in Sweden. The first panelist in our discussion is Jonas Otterheim. He's the head of climate action at Volvo Cars. And actually, it's almost 100 years, I think, when the first car came out of the Volvo factory in Gothenburg. So, and then the second panelist is Evalena Falck. She's the vice president, head of strategic account management at Volvo Cars. She has also a background, actually, in passenger cars, but then she moved to Scania and is now, of course, working more with the heavy traffic. Then we have Luca de Lorenzo, who is head of sustainability and mandate at the Nordic Investment Bank. NIB is very heavily involved in financing the whole value chain, not only in Sweden, but also in our region. And this is why we actually chose green mobility as a theme for our global campaign. Because NIB is part of the family of the multilateral development banks, which have run a campaign regarding climate. And before we actually start with the panel, we will show our episode, which is called Driving Decarbonization.
And cost of vehicles powered by internal combustion engines has made them our most popular mode of transport for a century. But fueled now by the urgency to reach net zero carbon emissions as quickly as possible, a seismic shift is happening across the world. A shift towards green mobility, requiring transformation and international collaboration across all levels of the value chain.
Green mobility is, put simply, it's a mobility without using or without emitting greenhouse gases. So we are looking at the transition where it's the electrified vehicles, but not only that, it's also, for example, using synthetic fuels. E-fuels will be needed to get there. For example, hydrogen is increasingly in demand and in need to support this vision. But we are not only talking about the private vehicles, we are also talking about, when we say green mobility, the public transportation, for example, trains, locomotives, ferries. They all need to be transitioning towards mobility without emitting the greenhouse gases.
While 95% of the world's transport energy is still driven by fossil fuels, and the transport sector produces 1/4 of all energy-related emissions, new and emerging technologies are driving the transformation, from low to zero carbon vehicles, to new power sources and digital infrastructure. And despite the clear intent to reduce carbon emissions, there is still a critical need to accelerate the speed of innovation across all levels of production, from the responsible mining and manufacturing of vehicles and batteries, right through to reuse and recycling. A transition which requires a scale of investment only possible through collaboration.
For green mobility, we need many things to happen. So, for example, we need the renewable energy sources, we need the batteries for electric vehicles, we need charging stations, we need supportive regulatory laws, and we at Nordic Investment Bank, we don't necessarily only look at the green mobility from one lens. We take an entire value chain approach. We are financing projects for renewable energies in our member states. We are financing battery-related projects. So Nordic Investment Bank looks at this value chain approach, and we are financing projects that enables this transition comprehensively.
The net zero transition in public mobility requires a rapid uptake of electric transportation. The Nordic Investment Bank providing significant investment to fast-track the speed and scale of change required, including more than $180 million in loans to Scania's research and development on new electric buses and trucks, $44 million to Northvolt for the ongoing construction of its large-scale lithium-ion battery manufacturing plant, more than $12 million to Helgeland Kraft for the rollout of electric vehicle charging infrastructure across northern Norway and an upgrade to a hydropower plant, and more than $420 million backing Denmark's state railway to transition its aging fleet into electric-powered locomotives.
Innovation is central to achieve the green transition. As we stand here today, we have the right technologies, we have the expertise, we have even the companies willing to commit to this transition. But what we are clearly lacking is more of a private, public, and academia collaboration. So if we can bring or accelerate this partnership between these three key enablers, I would think that we would definitely move a lot faster with the transition, but also we'll see more of the innovative products and technologies to accelerate the transition.
Governments play a key role, shaping policy, making strategic investments, and establishing regulatory frameworks that enable genuinely transformative initiatives. The solution lies in multiple stakeholders working together to reimagine a sustainable transport sector that also yields economic advantages.
We are creating a whole new industry of batteries for electric vehicles. We are creating new jobs that comes with that. We are generating additional renewable energy into our grids. That again creates a lot of new jobs, that creates the socio-economic benefit to the member states. But not only that, I mean, when you think about the spillover effects, for example, moving away from the fossil fuel vehicles and transitioning to electric vehicles will basically give us good air to live at, which means reduced hospital admissions that comes with the health risks and from the air pollutions. So, like I said, I think we have a lot of economic benefits, many of which we are already realizing, many still to achieve as we move towards this transition.
In the ongoing journey towards greener transportation, the way forward is clear. Collective action, innovation, and shared commitment, steering us all towards a cleaner, more efficient, and environmentally sustainable future.
So this was the contribution of the Nordic Investment Bank in the Global Climate Bank campaign. But now we start our panel discussion. I think the first question could be quite general, that how do you think the human beings and goods are moving, let's say 2030? Maybe we start with Jonas.
I think the first short answer is that we likely will move rather similar than we did today in terms of how we move. I think the main challenge we see from a car company perspective is that, of course, we need to electrify. and we will, by 2030, see a much bigger share of electrified or fully electric vehicles, well, hopefully globally, but at least in many markets that are currently running faster than others. Of course, this is a global challenge. Not all companies are transitioning as fast, but in some cases, well, the electrification is very much happening right now. So by 2030, I foresee that is a major change.
Evalena, a view from the heavy traffic.
Yes, I think we see a similar pattern. We also believe that there will be a much higher share of zero-emission trucks on the roads in 2030. Not only electric, we also believe that biogas or biomethane will play an important role if we look at the global aspect. But perhaps the other aspect that we also need to add is that hopefully we will also see a much more, let's say, green heavy trucks running on the streets. So it's not only going to be CO2 emissions coming out of the trucks, but also the production of the trucks should be done in a much more sustainable way by 2030. Then we will also see the beginning of the autonomous let's say, dimension, but it will be on a very initial phase by 2030.
And Luca, the financier's view.
Yeah, no, but the question is quite technical, so I think, but I think 2030 is actually not that far away. It's 7 years, 6 years almost. So I tend to agree that I don't think we will see a difference in how we move. I think what we'll see a difference is maybe what we use to move. Hopefully it will be more electric, for sure. Actually, that will be for sure, or some other technologies. But I also think, transport is quite a varied sector, actually. We call it transport. But I think here there is already a little bit of difference. And this is still road transport. Then you have ships, you have aviation. That's also transport. You have rail. So in the next, up to 2030, I think you will see different pieces of the transport sector moving at different pace.
Maybe, Jonas, how is Volvo Cars contributing to this electrification that you just mentioned?
Yeah, well, I already started mentioning it somewhat in terms of going electric. We see it very clearly that to decarbonize, well, road transport or light-duty road transport, well, fully electric cars is the way to go. The recent UN Global Stocktake report pointed out that electrification is the way to do it. So we are following that science right now. Volvo Cars have so far said that we are to be fully electric globally by 2030, meaning that we will only sell fully electric vehicles globally by 2030. But as Evalena just mentioned, of course, we recognize that we need to go further. So, well, firstly, we need to ensure that these electric vehicles are produced as sustainable as possible, meaning that we try to reduce emissions from the materials as much as possible. We recently announced a new corporate target saying that by 2030, we should have 75% lower CO2 emissions versus 2018. That therefore includes, of course, going full electric, but that is, to me, the easy part, well, reducing emissions from steel, aluminum, etc., so we can reach this level on a per-car level. I think that's a real challenge we are having, but what we're trying to reach right now.
Yeah, we come back to the value chain. But Evalena, maybe one question. So basically, you are deciding on behalf of the customers that if you want to buy a Volvo, then it will be electric after 2030.
Yes. We have set a rather clear strategy that we will only sell full electric vehicles globally, yes.
Yeah. All right. How is Scania contributing to the vision that we just discussed in the first round?
Well, I think on the heavy transport side, it will not be possible to electrify all heavy transport by 2030 from our perspective. And since we have this take to really have a global sustainability responsibility from a Scania perspective, we see that our contribution is to have a wide range of solutions that can really help no matter where you are, because we need to work on different technologies depending on availability of infrastructure, because that will be the main challenge. When it comes to then the production of the truck, I think our announcements in the last weeks has been really exciting, that we are going for 80% of our truck production to be done by sustainable parts, so including both of course batteries, super important, but also aluminium and sheet metal and steel. So and we have done that also together with our partners to really say that we can go with green steel 100% from 2030. So I think that is a very important contribution, that we work both on the decarbonization and also on the on the production value chain.
But you mentioned the biofuels, for example. The heavy traffic cannot, bet on one technology like the passenger cars.
No, I think if we look today, I mean, availability of green electricity is already a challenge in many parts of the world, and looking at the amount that would be needed to do heavy haulage on electrification, that will be a challenge everywhere by 2030, but definitely in some parts of the world it will be impossible. So I think complements are going to be necessary.
What is it, Luca, that you, when you are discussing the financing with the companies like Volvo Cars and Scania, what are the things that you look at?
No, absolutely. I mean, as you know, we had the luxury of having the video from NIB at the beginning, so you get a sense of what we look at from there. But effectively, you know, our approach is to join you guys on your journey towards electrification or sustainable fuels. You know, so we finance primarily R&D on your side for now, or production of the vehicles when it happens. But I think our contribution there is as the video was saying, is a little bit more holistic. So we don't look only at your piece, which is super important, and you're a key driver, right? But we also have in our clients your customers, for example. So we also finance fleets, right? So, you know, in your case, I totally agree. When you look at trucks, now or which are used for logistics, you know, in smaller networks, you know, so city-based logistics, maybe there you can electrify. Longer haul, not yet. So you need a multiple kind of mix also in the fleets, and we look at these options basically. But ultimately, what we do is look for impact, right, throughout the whole value chain.
Yeah.
Can I comment? No, I was just saying, thinking that I fully agree. I mean, technology will actually not be the challenge. I mean, we will have technology available also for heavy haulage to be done for long transports as well. But the challenge will be the change of the ecosystem, like you're into. I mean, we are talking about the huge change of a complete industry that is really fundamental. So I agree with you that this working together to move the ecosystem forward, that will be the main challenge, together with infrastructure.
Yeah,
I can fill in as well, because I think there's an interesting topic that we're touching upon here, because in the end of the day, we are, well, in different industries, we are, of course, in different markets around the world, and also the business models we try to support are, well, where our customers, well, how they buy our products, of course, that's different. So therefore, we shouldn't perhaps not have the same strategy. But in the end of the day, I think companies must be very clear on, well, what is their strategy? Because in our end, we realize even though we are a rather sort of big company, we're rather small in the global perspective. So therefore, we have taken a bet. We are going electric because we are too small to diverse and do everything at once. But this is a strategy we believe in, and therefore we are running for it. And I think that strategy might not be the right strategy for a truck producer to be like that precise, because I recognize that your industry is not where car industry is today. But I think sort of deciding, in your case, sort of being a bit more diverse, I think that's the key here.
But at the same time, I would say that also for heavy haulage, electrification will be the main path going forward. So I think that is a strategic bet that we have also taken. We think that it will be needed to have complements with the biofuels, with the biogas, and also potentially hydrogen to some sectors. But electrification will be also, from a financial perspective, the most interesting solution. When it will be definitely diesel, and also other fuels.
Luca.
And maybe just to complement a little bit, of course, we're mandate and sustainability driven bank. So we look at impact, but we also look a little bit at the profitability, let's say, of the business model. Because actually, if you really want to drive this change, it also has to be business-wise sensible, right? And for example, I think when we look at Volvo, it's very interesting to observe. You said it, as an automaker, I don't know what number you are in production, but it's not very high. But then if you take your EV, as an EV producer, I think you're number 3 or 4 now, which, that's quite amazing as a step up if you look at it that way. And then I think my other reflection is more broadly, maybe more towards Scania. You are a global truck supplier. So of course, what we are discussing here applies very much to our member region. And I think there is a lot of traction in those markets. But I'm sure it's difficult for Scania, globally to provide these kind of solutions, and you see different appetite in customers. But again, as a financiers, we also try to think ahead and see how you would be able to carry that over globally, right, as a sustainable solution.
All right, Jonas mentioned already the value chain, and you mentioned the ecosystem, so it's not only the product that you are, of course, sort of producing. Maybe we could try to sort of describe what is it actually, what is needed for the whole ecosystem. You have the product, what else?
That's a big question for the whole ecosystem, but we can start, and please fill in if you see other areas. Well, of course, we need to ensure that, well, in our case, electric vehicles need to be charged, so the charging infrastructure needs to be there. Of course, we need to have clean electricity put into the charging infrastructure, because in the end of the day, even though an electric car is better, even if it's charged with a rather high fossil mix, of course, we want to have the renewable. And then if we talk upstream, well, we recognize that many areas in our supply chain need to decarbonize very fast. We try to explore the use of, well, the near zero emission steel, because of course that is a key step to produce steel, along with recycled steel. And then aluminum, a very key area, battery manufacturing, and then I see in the rise, and we're having challenges with electronics, a rather opaque industry right now that we need to decarbonize. So plenty of challenges, but those value chains are deep. And that is perhaps a tricky angle to your whole ecosystem question.
Did Jonas forget something?
Yeah, well, I think we share the challenge, of course, when it comes to infrastructure, and I think it is much more dramatic as a challenge when it comes to heavy trucking, because what we need, I mean, to make it simple, to have a fast charger for a truck, it's almost like a small village in terms of electricity needs. So I think that is quite a big difference versus our, the charger that I have at home for my personal car. But for me, I mean, the charging, I think everyone is aware of, but the whole topic of moving, I mean, we are talking about a very conservative industry when it comes to the truck. Many small truck companies that have been working in the same way for 100 years. So I think the biggest change that we need to make is to handle the risk of this new shift in together. Because right now we see that the transport buyers are pushing this risk towards the transport companies. And it's very difficult for them to assume the risk, not only of the residual value of the vehicle, which is, of course, a big risk, but it's also the operational risk. I mean, you get a contract from a transport buyer for 2 years, and you're supposed to invest in an equipment that today costs 3 times as much as a normal diesel truck. So, I mean, it's a really big risk that is coming into the ecosystem that was never there before. And we need to share this risk in a new way, where I think you, from the financial sector, really can come in and take one piece of that. We need to take our responsibility as a truck manufacturer as well. We are the experts on knowing when the new technology will arrive. But for me, this is one of the biggest challenges that we need to take on together.
Oh, well put. I think from the ecosystem, you covered it well, Jonas. I wouldn't add anything, but you put it well. I think, and the same goes from a personal perspective, right? In personal cars, as I think all of us as an individuals. It is probably the biggest technological change that the auto industry has had since its inception. And that carries its risks, right? It means that some of the business models that are based on that transport asset, right, need to rethink somehow, right? I mean, you're doing the best to make it work in terms of keeping the same range, we're making that work, but also financially it does differ, right? You have maybe higher capital cost, initial capital, lower operational cost. You see some of that. And that in a business model means different, playing it differently. And that's where we as bankers also should have a look at those different models and finance accordingly. Absolutely.
But, yeah.
Can I fill in? Because I think both of you touched upon something that I think is interesting, that are also connected to where you started off with. Because, well, if we as companies and, well, the whole ecosystem is to take on this challenge, we need to collaborate very differently than what we have done before. We need to share the burden and sort of share this risk. And I think too few companies today sort of share their future outlook enough, so we therefore visualize it for the others in the value chain. Like you are doing with steel, I think, well, more companies should do such sort of talk about the need in the future and do the actual offtake agreements to show the future business. We recently communicated that we have the same in aluminum, so we will need, well, the breakthrough technologies to, well, produce near zero aluminum, and therefore commit to a certain level of such offtake agreements right now, because otherwise this industry will not even know there is a business, so they will not change in time. And I think there's something in here that more companies should share where they're going and actually put the money behind those quotes. Otherwise, this will be too slow.
I agree, and I think transparency is key to this whole change, because I think that is also the way to move forward when we talk about this collaboration between the transport buyer, the transport company, us as a manufacturer. When we sit down together, we need to also in that dialogue share, and it's also new for us. I mean, transport buyers have never been talking to us before as a truck manufacturer. Now they come and they ask, so what is the technology going to be? Which is going to be the main technology going forward? Because they realize they need to learn about it. And there, I mean, we used to be very, very secret about everything we did at Scania, but now we are sharing very openly how we see the journey when it comes to electrification, as an example. So I believe you are right, transparency will be key in this discussion. Another key, which just to add on one positive note to this, is that one, I believe, key to success will be utilization. Because for the heavy trucking, I mean, this whole financing these new risks will also be about optimizing utilization. And we do have a big challenge today. I mean, there is a lot of slack in the system, so roughly 40% of transports in Europe are empty. So this is something we need to address. And that will also be then a positive effect. Then we will also see that moving into then improved utilization by using digitalization and so on, then we will also have a more efficient transport system in 2030. So that's a positive note. Yeah.
We can come back to this utilization. Maybe you mentioned that how you can impact the value chain. What are the biggest? Of course, steel is one thing that you want to discuss with the steel producers. You want to sort of buy sustainable steel. But what are the ways you can actually impact and influence your value chain?
You mean from, yeah, I mean, we are, like you are saying, we are setting the demand now. I mean, we are saying clearly we need the partners that can step up and deliver a green solution to us. And that is our, let's say, that's where we are the customer, and that's where we are setting that demand towards our suppliers. And that's exactly what I'm hoping and seeing that some of the transport buyers that are also serious about sustainability are doing towards the transport companies. So for me, that is a key, is the demand setting by the customer, or the transport buyer, or the customer in this case.
And then the financier is setting demand for the...
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we set demands in terms of sustainability across all the value chain. So hopefully, you know, we help in that coordination or common direction at least. But I also had one, if I may, you're the moderator, but I also had a question for my... No, along this line, and do you ever think, or have you thought in your strategy discussions, you know, as players in this, where do you go in the value chain, right? So the ecosystem needs to shift. Now, the prime example, not to put, but, you know, like Tesla, right? Charging is a problem. They said, okay, you know what? I'm going to do superchargers. So I'm going to actually, even though I'm a car manufacturer, I'm going to take on part of the infrastructure challenge so that I can sell. You know, have you had discussions of where to go in the value chain?
Absolutely. I think that is a continuous strategic discussion in all companies. Well, if we just talk about charging, we so far have a view that we should not necessarily be the global charging infrastructure provider, but we do see in some countries where it's just lagging. So if we are to continue to sell electric cars there, we need to help. So therefore, we are market by market evaluating them, and in some markets we have acted. If we talk our upstreams of material productions, well, hopefully we can see that our suppliers are doing this, but we can see that in some cases, we need to do it more. So for batteries, for example, we recently formed this joint venture with Northvolt to both have battery manufacturing on site to ensure that we have, well, sustainably produced batteries, but also to do an R&D together with them to develop the next horizon of batteries, because we don't yet see that that is coming fast enough. And I think that's another example to it.
I think we have the same ambition level, and when it comes to infrastructure, we actually were the initiator to what is today Mylands, which is then the collaboration between, let's say, our worst competitors, Volvo Trucks and Mercedes, but where we are collaborating to put 1,700 chargers, fast chargers on the roads in 2030, which is going to be a good start. We still need another 9,000 to do long haulage transports around Europe. So I mean, it's a big gap still, but I think that's one good example of how we do it. Another example is this topic about handling risk that I was into before. I mean, I think that's also very much on our agenda. Which role should we play in that? How can we collaborate with you from the financial sector to handle that risk, and what should be our role? That's another part where we are looking into the value chain.
Well, I don't know, did you mention roads as part of the ecosystem? I think you didn't.
I did not.
Did you? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, you, Evalena, you were a bit hinting towards the kind of ownership and efficiency. So the whole thing about shared, sharing the cars, how do you see that at Volvo Cars, and how is it affecting your business model? And should that be the future, that more efficient use of the vehicles?
Yeah, very good question, because I hope that we can come back to that. Because right now, we are building full electric cars and trying to build them as sustainably as possible to reduce the CO2 emissions of the cars coming out. But of course, long term, we see that that is not enough if our company is to reach our fully climate neutrality target, or if the world is to stay within the net zero 2050 target, etc. So in one way or another, we need to make sure that, well, the sharing economy is becoming, well, is increasing even in cars. The challenge we have seen so far is that the business model is not really there yet, meaning that the profitability of sharing or having a sharing business is not as good as it is when it comes to selling cars. And that is coming back to our owners and the ones investing in us. From their perspective, it's not as good business, which is of course a trade-off to sustainability, but we need to continue to explore such businesses to ensure we are ready. So our strategy right now is to prepare the cars so they can be shared or be part of, well, a sort of multimodal system, even though they are so far mainly, well, sold as individual mobility. But of course, we need to play a relevant part in the future mobility landscape as well, whatever that might be.
What about heavy traffic?
Yeah, I think this discussion is coming up already when we start talking about electrification with transport buyers and so on, that you see when you calculate the business case that it simply doesn't, today it doesn't work. There are very few cases that we can make work today with high subsidies in some countries. But in most cases, it is a challenge still. And then we often get the question, can we not share this equipment so that when we don't utilize it, or that we can use it for together with someone else? And again, I think we have an active role to play in the system to find these possibilities of collaborating, creating green lanes as an example, where we build both the infrastructure and we then share between different transport buyers so that we make the business case work by higher utilization. So I think it's an absolutely important topic.
So Luca, NIB is of course relating to that, also financing many other forms of transport as well. Maybe you could also reflect the role of these passenger cars, heavy traffic in the whole sort of ecosystem of moving people and
absolutely
goods.
And I'll come to that. I'll start maybe answering this utilization or sharing, right, which ultimately is about increasing utilization of the actual asset, which from a pure sustainability perspective makes a lot of sense. And actually, if you think about it, also economically, it should make sense, because you're utilizing more an asset. That usually is an efficient way of using the asset, and therefore also a better economic rationale of doing it. But somehow it's not that easy, right? I mean, the car has given us freedom. It's nice to own it because you can use it when you want, and sharing it, despite having digital solutions and so on, is not maybe the easiest thing to do. And I'm less familiar with the truck, but I think there is something around that as well, right? But from a financier, what is interesting is how you make that business profitable, as you said, so that it actually makes sense. But also, it implies possibly a change of ownership. And change of ownership, if you sum all these are one single assets, trucks or cars, but if you sum all of them up, they're big numbers. They become big, amount of money. And so which balance sheet does it sit on? Who has the risk of the business? Suddenly becomes very intriguing from a financial point of view. I don't think it's difficult to solve. You can have fleet management, but it's different. At least it's different. So we would have to think about it. So that's around sharing and so on. But then, of course, you're right, Jukka. We also finance, as we saw in the video, rail transport, shipping. So there is something around. Now here in the panel we have road transport, but transport is wider. So you can also have a shift of mode, right? in the way we look at things, both for people or for good. That's something that we look at NIB also when we look at impact of moving things. Ultimately, the goal is to move people and goods. How, we don't really care, to be honest. But I'm curious, actually, maybe to hear from your perspective if you also follow this potential change of modes of transports. So will we, it doesn't have to be always a truck. Sorry to say.
No, but I think I can comment on that in the sense that we are doing the same with our own supply chain. When it comes to our own transports, we are also looking into intermodal to find the most optimal sustainable solutions. So I think absolutely, but I don't think we should also be naive when it comes to other sustainable alternatives, because I mean infrastructure takes time to build, and one fast way to make it happen is that we have the technology available to do a lot of the transports already today with zero emission with the electric trucks. So I think that will be one main mode, but absolutely open to look at combination with others.
Okay.
Can I come back a bit more to the financial angle to this? Because I think you are playing an important role that we have not yet touched upon here. We see and feel rather big pressure when it comes to financial sector in terms of changing and becoming more sustainable. So, well, we are having ambitious climate targets, but companies like you also have that. We are reporting according to all these legal frameworks and having SBTi targets, etc. Companies like you usually have that as well. And due to that, well, we feel the pressure because you are asking, well, in your case, your suppliers or your investments to change as well, and are asking us the tough questions we usually ask our suppliers. And I think there's an interesting connection here because even though, well, we usually talk about our customers as, well, the consumers as our customer, but I think the financial sector here is also playing a very important role that should not be forgotten in terms of if you continue to push us, well, we will recognize that our owners, well, want us to do this, and that is usually helping companies change faster as well.
All right. Now, actually, our time is almost out, so we get the final question. And that is basically, we talked about 2030, but now if you look a bit beyond that, a little bit more wilder visions that how are people and goods moving 2050. Jonas.
I think we could likely talk about sort of fully electric, fully autonomous, shared. And I hope, at least when it comes to shared, that reality is coming closer. But we don't actually talk that much about 2050. We want to talk about today because we have enough challenges as it is. So we can sort of talk about those futures eventually.
Yeah, I would share that. We are also very much action-oriented and here and now, and we find solutions here and now. But the one aspect that we have not talked about that I'm hoping will come into play already 2030, but definitely towards 2050, and that is the people sustainability, because this whole shift of the ecosystem will also lead to other opportunities. So some of the challenges that we have faced in our industry with the driver conditions, safety conditions inside and outside the truck, all of these things can also be handled, and hopefully we will see dramatic changes also in these areas going forward. So that's perhaps the dimension that I would then add on already 2030, but definitely towards 2050.
All right, and Luca, last wild thoughts.
Wild thought, okay, well, no, I think, I think to 2030, you're doing a fantastic job. We're going to change what we use to move around. I think, and I hope by 2050, we will also change the how, right? So it's going to be autonomous. It's going to probably in cities, we might not even use them. We will use them only for longer trips. And so to 2030 or so on, it's the what, the asset. To 2050, it's going to be also the how. But I like your short-term action-oriented approach, really, very much.
All right, thank you very much. And I think we made it. We started with the slow lane and we got to the fast lane and also in this debate. So thank you very much. Thank you very much.